By the time the dinner bells rang in Windrider Hall, Aurora's hands were already split open. Lye water had eaten the skin from her knuckles. Cold had finished the rest. She knelt on black stone steps with a brush made of boar bristle and wire, scrubbing mud and horseblood where nobles would walk in embroidered slippers and call the floor clean by birthright. "Harder, kitchen rat," Briggs said behind her. The overseer's boot pressed between her shoulder blades until her ribs ground against stone. "Lady Isolde dines tonight. If she sees a stain, I'll peel your hide for polish." Aurora swallowed what wanted to come out of her mouth. Rage, prayer, a curse, and scrubbed until the brush slipped from her numb fingers. The iron cuff around her ankle bit when she shifted. The chain was short enough to keep her from running, long enough to make running hurt. Every time she dragged the bucket, Lynx scraped her skin raw and left bright commas of blood on the floor she had to clean again. When Brig yanked her up by the back of her dress, pain flashed white down her spine. "Move. You serve table now. Try not to look like a corpse." In the great hall, heat struck her face from 3 roaring hearths: meat, wine, cloves, polished steel, wet wool. Lords laughed too loud. Ladies glittered like frost. At the high table sat Isolde Windrider in moon-silver silk, her pale hair braided with tiny pearls, her smile sharp as a surgeon's knife. Aurora kept her eyes down and poured. "Stormborn delays again," one lord muttered over his cup. "The Alpha King grows arrogant." Isolde smiled without warmth. "Drake Stormborn grows predictable. Arrogance can be bridled. Blood can be directed." A ripple of laughter followed. Aurora's hands tightened around the decanter. Another voice, oily and amused, belonged to her master, Lord Halric. "And the blood moon line remains ash, as promised. No claimant left to trouble us." Isolde lifted a goblet. "To extinction, then. To stable rule." Aurora missed a breath. Wine sloshed over her hand. Brig's palm cracked across her face so hard she tasted copper. "Clumsy thing." She steadied the goblet before it tipped, eyes burning. Isolde looked at her then, not at the blood on Aurora's lip, but at her face. Properly, fully, for the first time. Aurora felt the weight of that gaze like a blade laid flat against her throat. "Where did you get this one?" Isolde asked. "Bought in Redfen, my lady," Halric said. "No name worth keeping." Aurora lowered her head further. No name worth keeping. She had heard it so often that sometimes it echoed in her sleep. Isolde took another sip. "Her eyes are unusual. Keep her out of sight when I host court. I dislike distractions." "As you command." By midnight, the hall was empty of nobles and full of servants cleaning what privilege left behind. Aurora carried trenchers to the lower cellars where old banners, cracked shields, and seized relics were stacked in damp rows. Halric sold history the way he sold people, piece by piece. "Burn this heap before dawn," Briggs said, dropping a bundle into her arms. "Lady Isolde wants no moldy ghosts in her carts." He stomped away. Aurora knelt by the brazier and untied the twine. A painted face stared back from the top canvas. A woman in wolf fur mantle, silver eyes, dark hair braided with moonstone. Queen Alara Blood Moon. The portrait was smoke-stained and slashed, but the jawline was her own. The eyes were her own. Aurora's stomach dropped. Her mother's lullaby rose in her head, the one she had sung only under blankets, only when no one listened. Moon in the marrow, blood in the bone, child of the silver house, never alone. She had thought it a comfort song, not a warning. Beneath the portrait lay a small iron coffer, lid stamped with the crescent and fang crest of Blood Moon. It should have been locked, but rust had eaten the hinge. She pried it open with a poker. Inside, on black velvet, sat a ring, heavy gold, a moonstone in the center, cracked through like lightning. Along the inner band, tiny engraved runes she had traced with childish fingers once, before fire and screams and the long years after. Her breath shook. She slid the ring into her palm. Warm. Impossible. Footsteps sounded above. Aurora shoved the portrait under discarded cloth, closed the coffer, and dropped the ring into the ragged hem lining she'd stitched as a hidden pocket months ago. By the time Brig reappeared, she was feeding banners into flame. He sniffed. Done whining? She nodded. Good. Lord Halric has decided you're wasted in kitchens. Tomorrow you go to physician stock with the others. Ice spread through her chest. She knew physician stock. Windowless carts, chained girls, men with clean hands and dead eyes. For what purpose? She asked before she could stop herself. Brig grinned, broken-toothed. For the kingdom, rat. Isn't that an honor? He laughed when she flinched. That was the moment something in her stopped begging. It had been a thin thing for years. Hope, dignity, whatever refused to die, but under Brig's grin it sharpened instead of broke. She did not sleep. She waited. When the kitchen clock struck 2, she slid from her pallet, wrapped her bleeding feet in torn cloth, and stole the key ring hanging by the scullery door. Her hands shook so hard metal chimed. She froze, listening, snoring, wind-clawing shutters, rain beginning in hard, slanting sheets. The chain on her ankle had 2 locks. The second key stuck. She twisted until skin tore and the shackle came loose with a wet pop. She almost cried out, didn't. At the stable, she found no horse saddled for her luck. Of course not. Runaways were expected to use feet. Feet were easy to track. She took a butcher's knife, a sack of hard bread, and Brig's wool cloak from its peg. Then she slipped toward the north wall where old stone had settled and left a narrow gap near the drainage gate. Hounds started barking before she reached it. Up! Up! Someone shouted inside. She's loose! Lantern light flared gold against rain. Aurora dropped to her belly and crawled through the drainage slit, stone scraping her hips, chain links snagging. She kicked free of the last cuff, left it behind, and tumbled into the ditch beyond the wall in a splash of black water. Arrows hissed into mud around her. There! Brig's voice, ragged with fury. Bring me the bitch alive! She ran. Reeds whipped her face. Rain blinded her. Mud sucked at her ankles until every stride felt like pulling free from hands. Behind her, hounds bayed, closer then farther as thunder rolled. She splashed through a stream to break scent, climbed a shale bank on all 4s, slid back down, climbed again. At dawn, she hid under fallen pine roots while riders passed on the ridge above. By the second night, hunger knotted her gut so tight she retched bile. Allies would sell her back. If she went east, Halric's allies would sell her back. If she went south, Windrider patrols. West was mountains, winter death. North meant stormborn territory, wolflands where law was hard but clear, where sanctuary could be claimed if granted by the Alpha himself. Could be granted, could be denied, could still mean life. She chose north and kept moving. On the 4th day, the rain turned cold enough to sting. Forest thinned. Wind smelled of pine pitch and distant snow. Aurora stumbled through a line of standing stones carved with storm sigils she recognized from market gossip, the border markers of Stormborn. Relief hit so suddenly her knees buckled. Then 3 wolves stepped onto the path ahead and shifted into men with practiced ripples of muscle and bone, naked but for belts and blades. Border sentries. Their eyes were storm gray, watchful, not kind. Stop there, the tallest said. Aurora did. If she ran now, they would bring her down in 3 strides. Name, he demanded. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her old name had gotten people killed. Her slave name tasted like dirt. Aurora, she said finally, voice cracked. No pack. He looked at the bloody remains of iron still clamped around one ankle, at the bruises on her throat, At the knife in her belt she clearly didn't know how to throw. Windrider lands behind you? Yes. Crime? Existing. The youngest sentry snorted, almost a laugh, almost pity. The tall one didn't smile. You carry stolen goods? Her fingers twitched toward her hem and stopped. I carry what is mine. A long pause. Rain hissed through pines. Stormborn doesn't return living property, he said at last. But liars lose tongues. Understand? Aurora nodded. He jerked his chin. Walk. Keep your hands where I see them. Stormborn Keep rose out of the cliffs at dusk, dark towers laced with lightning rods, banners snapping black and silver above walls thick as a giant's fist. The gatehouse fire pits burned blue with alchemical oil. Wolves padded the battlements, eyes bright in gathering dark. Aurora smelled bread first, then forge smoke, then wet fur and iron and something electric in the air that made the fine hairs on her arms lift. Inside the outer yard, warriors drilled in the rain like the weather was nothing. At their center, a man stood bareheaded, black hair plastered to his skull, scar splitting one eyebrow and continuing down his throat beneath an open training vest. He moved through opponents like storm water through stone, inevitable, brutal, controlled. Alpha, the sentry beside her said, low. Drake Stormborn turned as they approached. His gaze hit her like impact, not leering, not dismissive, assessing, sharp enough to peel lies to the bone. Aurora dropped her eyes by instinct, then forced herself to lift them again. He looked at the chain biting her ankle, at the blood dried down her calf, at the rain-slick shiver she couldn't stop. Another refugee? He asked the sentry. From Windrider Border, my king. Drake's jaw tightened at the word Windrider. Fed? Not yet. Then why is she standing in the rain? The question cracked like a whip. Two nearby warriors moved at once. Aurora swayed, suddenly dizzy with exhaustion, and the absurd, dangerous urge to trust the command in his voice. Her hand found the hidden seam in her hem one more time, fingers pressing the shape of the ring through wet cloth. Drake's nostrils flared once, as if catching some faint scent carried under blood and rain. His eyes narrowed, not in rejection, recognition of something he could not place. For one suspended heartbeat, thunder rolled over the keep, and neither of them looked away. Thunder rolled over the keep, and neither of them looked away. Then Drake took one step toward her, and the world changed. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was violent. Heat slammed through Aurora's chest so hard she gasped. The hidden ring in her hem seemed to flare against her thigh, hot as fresh forged metal. Every bruise on her body lit up in answer. Her pulse jumped, then stuttered into a rhythm that didn't feel like hers alone, two beats braided together, one in her veins, one somewhere outside her skin. Drake's breath caught audibly. His eyes, storm gray a moment before, flashed molten gold at the center. Not a trick of torchlight. A wolf's gaze surfacing under a king's control. Around them, the training yard noise blurred. Rain hissed. Steel rang faint and far away. Aurora became fiercely aware of scent, whetstone, blood, pine resin, and beneath Drake's skin a wild electric smell like ozone before lightning strikes. It hit the back of her throat, made her wolf, buried, starved, nearly forgotten by years of chains, stir and lift its head. Mine, something instinctive whispered. No. Impossible. Fear came first, sharp and practical. Men in power who looked at her with intensity were never safe. Then came something worse. Want. Not for touch exactly. For nearness. For the crushing certainty that if she reached for him, she would not fall. Aurora hated it instantly. Drake moved again, slower this time, like he was approaching a skittish animal he had no intention of cornering. Rain tracked down the scar, slicing his brow and throat. What is your full name? He asked. The sentry beside her began. She gave only Drake lifted a hand without looking away from Aurora, silencing him. She swallowed. Her tongue felt thick. Aurora. House? Her fingers pressed through wet cloth to the ring until the moonstone edge bit her skin. If she said it and he decided she was trouble, she would vanish into another cellar and no one would ask where. If she lied, those gold-flecked eyes looked made to drag truth out by force. Aurora. No house, she said, hating the tremor in her voice. His nostrils flared. She watched realization strike him in fragments. Confusion, denial, recognition so deep it looked like pain. The scars at his throat, pale against rain-dark skin, gave a sudden faint shimmer, silver under the surface as if moonlight had passed through him. He went still as a drawn bow. Alpha, one warrior asked warily, hand near his sword. Drake's answer came rougher than before. Cut the shackle. A blacksmith's apprentice hurried over with tongs and a short hammer. Aurora flinched when he reached for her ankle. Drake dropped to one knee in the mud first. The entire yard seemed to inhale. Kings did not kneel in rain for nameless runaways. Look at me, Drake said quietly. She did, because not looking felt more dangerous now than obedience. I won't let him hurt you, he said. No man had ever said those words to her, and meant them. She held his gaze as the apprentice wedged metal under rusted iron and struck. The cuff split with a crack. Pain shot up her leg when it came loose, skin tearing where infection had glued flesh to steel. Aurora hissed between her teeth. Drake's hand moved, stopped inches from her calf. May I? He asked. The question stunned her more than the pain. She gave one tight nod. His fingers were warm despite the rain, broad and calloused, warrior hands used to breaking bone. He touched her as if she were glass he refused to crack, steadying her heel while the apprentice pulled the ruined shackle free. When blood welled, Drake swore under his breath, low and furious, not at her, at the wound. Medic Hall, he snapped. Now. A guard hesitated. Sire, Windrider banners arrived an hour ago. Lady Isolde requests audience at first bell. Council? Then council can wait. Gold flashed again in Drake's irises. She bleeds first. He rose in one fluid movement and held out his hand. Aurora stared at it. Rain gathered in his palm, ran down the lines of old scars. He did not grab, did not command. Offered. Her own hand lifted before her mind agreed. The instant their skin met, a hot current shot up both their arms. Drake sucked in a sharp breath. Aurora bit hers back too late. Their wrists tightened reflexively, not letting go. For one reckless heartbeat she felt him. Fury banked under iron control, loneliness old as winter, and beneath both a reverent terror that matched her own. Then the connection snapped back behind skin, leaving her shaking. Drake released her first, jaw clenched hard. Get her dry clothes, he said to no one and everyone. A room in the inner ward. Guarded. The sentry blinked. Inner ward is for sworn... Did I stutter? No, Alpha. Drake looked at Aurora again, voice low enough that only she heard. You are under my protection while you stand in Stormborn Stone. She should have thanked him. Instead, she asked, because panic made her cruel. Protection at what cost? Something flinched behind his eyes, so fast she almost missed it. No cost, he said. Not from me. He stepped back before she could answer, as if distance were a discipline he had to choose each second. Take her, he ordered, and strode away through rain without once looking behind him. Aurora watched him go, hand still tingling where he had touched her, heart beating in that strange doubled rhythm. The room they gave her had a door that locked from the inside. Aurora stood staring at the iron bolt for a long minute before sliding it home. The sound made her chest ache. No one chained her overnight. No one came for her before dawn. By habit, she woke before first bell anyway, and searched for work before someone could accuse her of idleness. A maid pointed mutely toward the lower stairwell, where servants were already hauling buckets and brushes. Aurora took one without being told and ended up on the eastern terrace steps, black stone, slick with rain and tracked with mud from last night's drills. She knelt and scrubbed until her shoulders burned. Lai found the cracked skin on her knuckles and bit deep. Good. Pain was familiar. Familiar meant survivable. Those are not your assigned duties. Drake's voice came from above her, not loud, just present. Aurora jerked and almost dropped the brush. He stood 2 steps up in a dark training shirt, hair still damp from sparring, a leather wrap around one wrist. No crown, no audience. More dangerous somehow, because he looked like himself, and not a symbol. I can work, she said, bracing for correction. I didn't say you couldn't. He descended 1 step, eyeing the red water in her bucket. I said these aren't your duties. What are my duties then? Breathing your air for free? His mouth twitched. Not a smile exactly. In Stormborn, sanctuary isn't indenture. Aurora scrubbed harder. In every place I've ever stood, food had a price. A long pause. Then the brush disappeared from her hand. She looked up sharply. Drake had taken it and crouched beside her, setting the bristles to stone with efficient, practiced strokes. You don't have to, she began. No, he agreed. I don't. He cleaned 3 steps in silence while she stared, too startled to move. The Alpha King of Stormborn Keep, feared by half the court, scrubbing mud off stairs before dawn like a stable boy. Before they split to bone. I've had before they split to bone. I've had worse. I know. His gaze dropped to the faint rope scars at her wrist, then rose back to her face. Hands, Aurora. Only if you permit it. The last words were careful, deliberate. She extended her hands. He unwrapped a small tin from his belt and dabbed salve onto each cracked knuckle with the concentration of a field medic stitching a comrade under fire. His touch stayed precisely where needed, never sliding into familiarity. He bound each hand with narrow strips of clean linen, firm but not tight, checking circulation like this mattered as much as strategy or war. Who taught you this? She asked before she could stop herself. Campaign Winters, he said. You learn quickly when frostbite takes fingers faster than blades. You could have called a healer. A shadow crossed his face. I rarely call healers unless I must. Something in that answer felt jagged, private. Aurora filed it away. When he tied off the last wrap, he sat back on his heels and looked at her bandaged hands as if verifying a completed oath. No lye water for 2 days, he said. Kitchen steward has been told. You ordered that? I did. Why? His jaw tightened. Because you're not livestock, and I won't watch this keep treat you as if you are. The words landed hard. Footsteps sounded at the terrace arch. 2 guards approaching. Drake stood immediately, distance re-established, expression shuddering into command. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and set something on the step beside her. A small carved wolf bone charm threaded on black cord. Storm sigils etched along its spine. Someone dropped this near the armory, he said too casually. Might as well keep it. Then he was gone, cloak snapping in the wind. Aurora picked up the charm with wrapped fingers. It was warm from his body heat. On the back, almost hidden in the carving, was a tiny crescent mark, an old ward against nightmare-walking spirits. Misplaced, he had said, so she could accept it without debt. She closed her fist around it and sat very still while sunrise thinned the clouds over Stormborn's walls. By midday, debt came anyway, in the form of nobles. The throne room of Stormborn Keep was all ironwood beams and storm glass windows. Sunlight fractured into cold blue bands across the floor. Aurora stood near the base of the dais in plain gray borrowed clothes, hair braided tight to hide shaking hands. Drake sat above in the carved wolf throne, unreadable, flanked by captains and council elders. Opposite them stood Lord Halric in travel furs, dry-eyed and perfumed despite the long ride, with two Windrider clerks clutching scroll tubes. When Halric's gaze found Aurora, his smile widened like a trap snapping shut. "There," he said, "my stolen property." Aurora's stomach turned to ice. Her fingers found the wolf-bone charm hidden in her sleeve and squeezed. One clerk unrolled a parchment and read in a nasal drone. By purchase contract witnessed in Redfen Market, the bonded servant designated Oro, unmarked, age uncertain, belongs to Lord Halric Vane of Windrider Hall. Removal across border constitutes theft. Under Interpack Commerce Statute, said property must be returned immediately. Property, designated, unmarked, old language, old chains. Aurora forced herself to stand upright. She could feel Drake's attention on her like heat from a forge, waiting, giving her room to speak if she chose. Halric lifted his chin at the throne. "Alpha Stormborn, I honor your border law. Return what is mine, and we avoid insult between houses." One council elder murmured, "Trade statutes are clear." Drake raised a hand. Silence cut clean. He descended from the dais, each step measured. At floor level he seemed larger, scars stark, power held on a short leash. He stopped 3 feet in front of Halric. "Say that sentence again," Drake said mildly. Halric blinked. "I requested lawful return of my property." The sound Drake made was almost a laugh and had no humor in it. Bone shifted under skin. His canines lengthened. Claws slid from his fingertips with a soft, lethal click. Vibrated in Aurora's ribs. Sanctuary vibrated in Aurora's ribs. "Sanctuary claimant on Stormborn Stone is not property," he said. "Under Alpha law, no living being who asks refuge may be sold, seized, or surrendered without their spoken consent before witness." Halric's color drained, but greed made him reckless. "She is branded by contract." "Then show me the brand." The room went very still. Aurora lifted her chin. "There is none," she said, voice clear despite the hammering in her chest, "because he kept me collared, not marked." Halric snapped, "Silence, girl." Drake turned his head a fraction toward him. "You will address her by name." "I don't know her name." "Aurora," Drake said, claws still visible. "Use it." Halric's mouth worked. One of the Windrider clerks stepped forward hastily with another scroll. "My lord also carries medical advisement from Lady Isolde Windrider regarding this woman's instability and—" Drake's growl deepened. "I did not summon Lady Windrider's opinion." He held out his hand. The clerk, shaking, surrendered the scroll. Drake broke the seal, skimmed 2 lines, and his expression turned glacial. "Forged formatting," he said to his steward without looking up. "Wrong registrar mark. Seize both documents." The steward took them at once. Halric blustered, sweat shining at his temple. "You accuse me of fraud?" "I accuse you of crossing my border to reclaim a breathing person as cargo." Drake took 1 step closer, close enough that Halric flinched. "Try again and you'll leave without the hand that signed these papers." No one in the hall doubted he meant it. Then Drake did something Aurora did not expect. He stepped aside and extended an arm, not in front of her, but to indicate a place beside him. "Come stand here," he said. She hesitated only a heartbeat before moving to his shoulder, close enough to feel heat from his skin, far enough to remain her own. The gesture struck the room harder than any growl. Not shielded behind him, not displayed below him, at his side. Drake addressed the court. "Record this ruling. Aurora, claimant of sanctuary, remains under Stormborn protection by her own will. Any attempt to remove her will be treated as an act against my crown." The scribe's quill scratched furiously. Halric looked between them and understood too late that the hierarchy he trusted had shifted. "You'd risk conflict for a kitchen slave?" Aurora answered before Drake could. "I was never your slave in anything but circumstance." Her voice did not shake this time. Halric spat at the floor and backed away, bow gone stiff and shallow. "Windrider will hear of this." "They can read," Drake said. "Dismissed." Guards escorted Halric and his clerks out under steel-pointed courtesy. The doors boomed shut behind them. Only then did Drake let the claws retract. He flexed his hands once, as if shaking off the wolf's urge to do worse. When he turned toward Aurora, the gold had faded from his eyes, leaving storm gray and something like apology. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Aurora stared at him. "You didn't have to do any of it." "I know." "Why?" His gaze held hers, steady as a vow not yet spoken. "Because you asked sanctuary," he said. "And because when I look at you, every instinct I trust says, protect." The doubled heartbeat thudded between them again, undeniable. Aurora touched the hidden seam in her hem where the blood moon signet waited like a second secret, then touched the wolfbone charm in her sleeve. Two kinds of inheritance. Two kinds of risk. For the first time since she had crawled through a drainage gate in the rain, she let one guardrail inside her chest drop. Not all the way, not yet, but enough to breathe around. "Then I need to tell you something," she said. And this time, when Drake inclined his head, she believed he would listen. "Then I need to tell you something," she said. And this time, when Drake inclined his head, she believed he would listen. He dismissed the court with two clipped orders and took her through a side passage behind the dais, past war maps and locked weapon racks, into a narrow strategy chamber lit by one high window and a brazier that smelled faintly of cedar. No guards inside, no scribes, just stone, heat, and silence. "Speak freely," he said. Aurora reached for the hidden seam in her hem with bandaged fingers and ripped the stitches open. The ring dropped into her palm with a dull gold flash, runes inside the band. There was no runes inside the band. There was no mistaking it. Even battered by years and smoke, it still looked like authority. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice gone low and dangerous. "From my master's relic vault." She swallowed. "From a coffer-marked blood moon." His gaze snapped to hers. "My mother sang me a lullaby in the old tongue," Aurora said. "I thought it was nonsense meant to quiet children. Then I found a portrait in his cellar. Queen Alara Blood Moon. Same eyes. Same face." She forced the next words out before fear could cage them again. "My name is Aurora Bloodmoon." The room went very still. Drake did not reach for the ring. He did not accuse her of lying. He watched her like a commander watching a battlefield tip from skirmish to war. "How long have you known?" he asked. "4 nights." "And Lady Isolde?" Aurora laughed once, bitter. "She looked at me at dinner in Windrider Hall. Properly looked. She asked where Halric had gotten me and told him to keep me out of sight." She closed her fist around the ring. "If she connected my face to the old portraits, she won't stop at gossip." A muscle jumped in Drake's jaw. "No." She called the blood moon line ash while she drank wine to extinction. Aurora met his eyes. "I think she meant to finish what fire started." A hard knock sounded on the chamber door. Drake opened it a crack. Captain Rourke stood beyond, wet cloak dark with rain, expression tight. "Sire, Windrider escort at the gate. Lady Isolde requests immediate audience under treaty seal." Of course she did. Drake's face turned to carved stone. "Put her in waiting hall 3. No private access. Triple guard on the inner ward." Rourke hesitated, then added quietly, "She brought 3 royal physicians, 2 clerks from the Capital Registry, and a chest of sealed decrees." Aurora felt cold spread through her belly. Drake's gaze returned to her, sharp now with urgency. "Stay in this room until I send for you." "I'm done hiding in rooms," she said. His nostrils flared, that storm scent rising under his skin. "This isn't hiding. This is me buying 5 minutes before she turns court into a knife pit." Aurora set her jaw. "Then I stand where I can see the knives." For one heartbeat he looked like he might argue. Then he gave a short nod. "At my shoulder," he said. "No farther." Isolde Windrider entered Stormborn's great audience hall as if she owned the weather. Silver silk, pearl braids, a smile polished to mercy and sharpened to harm. Behind her came two clerks in royal blue, each carrying scroll cases sealed with red wax, and three physicians in white wolf fur cloaks, faces carefully blank. The physicians didn't look at Aurora when they passed. Interesting, Aurora thought. Afraid already? Isolde bowed just enough to respect protocol without surrendering an inch. "Alpha King, your hospitality remains legendary." "State your purpose," Drake said. "Gladly." Isolde's gaze drifted, found Aurora, and widened in theatrical surprise. "Ah, there she is." The hall pricked to attention. Isolde took one elegant step forward and addressed the room, not Drake. "Nobles of Stormborn, forgive my urgency. This woman has deceived your court. She is a Windrider fugitive and a probable impostor claiming blood she cannot prove." Murmurs broke across the benches. Aurora felt the old reflex, to lower her eyes, shrink, disappear, rear up like a trained beast. She kept her chin level instead. Isolde went on, voice silken. "More concerning, she carries a child under suspicious circumstance while unstable and untreated. I have, with regrettable duty, petitioned medical containment for the safety of both kingdoms." One of the royal clerks snapped open a decree and read in ringing cadence. "By authority delegated through Crown Registry, subject Aurora, identity disputed, is deemed unfit for standard healer intervention pending lineage investigation and contagion screening." "Contagion?" Drake's voice cut through the reading like an axe. The clerk faltered. "That is the language provided, my king." Isolde placed a hand over her heart as if grieved by necessity. Rumors spread quickly, unfortunately. Curses cling to contested wombs. Better caution than civil war. Aurora realized then that Isolde was not improvising. This had been built in advance. Official seals, physicians as props, words designed to sound reasonable while killing slowly. Elegant cruelty, wrapped in policy. Drake descended one step from the dais. "You do not issue orders in my keep." "Nor do I intend to," Isolde said lightly. "I merely bring medical advisement from the royal registry." She turned toward him with practiced softness. "You and I both know stability matters more than sentiment. Formalize our mating alliance, and this unfortunate confusion can be resolved without blood." There it was, cleanly spoken. Marry power, erase obstacle. Aurora's hand tightened around the hidden ring until the cracked moonstone edge bit her palm. Drake did not look at Isolde when he answered. His eyes stayed on Aurora as if anchoring himself. "I decline your claim." A ripple, half shock, half hunger for scandal, ran through the hall. Isolde's smile held, but only just. "Do you decline as alpha or as male already entangled?" "As sovereign," Drake said. "And as a male with functioning judgment." A few wolves in the back failed to hide their grim smiles. Isolde's gaze sharpened to needles. "Then hear this plainly. If that woman dies unattended, Windrider bears no liability. If she lives and proves false, you will have harbored a forger carrying an unregistered heir claim. Either path spills into war." She dipped her head and stepped back. Performance complete. "My clerks will leave copies of all decrees with your infirmary." The trap set. Legally deniable, politically explosive. By the time she withdrew, Aurora understood exactly why Isolde was dangerous. She didn't need a blade when she could make good people obey paper. By sunset, the decrees were everywhere, pinned outside the infirmary, whispered in kitchens, repeated in corridor corners by servants who crossed themselves against bad luck. Unfit for treatment, contested womb, cursed blood. Aurora walked into the healer wing and conversations died like snuffed candles. Rows of tinctures lined the shelves: juniper, clove, fever bark. Familiar smells from years of hauling crates for Halrich's physicians. The senior healer, Mistress Vera, stood rigid near the herb table, hands clasped too tight. "I need to know if those decrees are legal," Aurora said. Vera wouldn't meet her eyes. "They carry registry seals. Seals can be forged." Silence. Aurora stepped closer. "If I go into labor and bleed, will you treat me?" Vera's throat worked. "I have 6 apprentices, 2 sons in the Capital Academy. Windrider controls half our supply routes." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They threatened exile for any healer who touches you before lineage adjudication." There it was. Not superstition. Threat. Aurora breathed once through the surge of cold panic and nodded. "Thank you for answering." As she turned to leave, one younger apprentice blurted, "It isn't right." An older healer gripped his sleeve hard enough to bruise, silencing him. Chose her pressure points perfectly. His chose her pressure points perfectly. His eyes went gold at the edges, wolf furious under skin. "I can arrest half the registry by dawn." "And prove Isolde's story that I bring chaos?" Aurora shook her head. "She wants you to strike first and look unstable." Drake cursed softly. They started walking without discussing destination, drawn by the bond's pull and the keep's restless currents until they reached a high battlement overlooking the black pines. Wind knifed through arrow slits. Distant lightning spidered under low clouds. Aurora leaned her forearms on cold stone and tried to ignore the tightness low in her abdomen that had been coming and going all afternoon. Drake stood beside her, not touching. Not. After a long silence, he said, "You're in pain." "Just pressure." She lied poorly. "Aurora." She exhaled. "I am with child." He did not flinch, though his scent sharpened. Storm, iron, something protective and raw. "How far?" "Early." She pressed a palm to her belly. "Too early for this to be happening now." His voice gentled. "Has a healer examined you since you crossed my border?" "No." Rage flickered across his face, then discipline slammed over it. "I should have insisted." "You asked permission," she said. "No one has ever done that with me. I didn't know how to answer half your kindness without expecting payment." He turned toward her fully then. "There is no payment." The doubled heartbeat pulsed between them, insistent and frighteningly intimate. Aurora laughed without humor. "That is easy for kings to say. Harder for people who have always been bought." Drake looked out over the pines. "When I was 16, a seer told my father I would destroy the kingdom if I mated for instinct instead of treaty." His mouth flattened. "He spent the next decade trying to breed strategy into me and cut wolf out of me." Aurora glanced at him. He rarely spoke of himself at all. "I learned control," he went on. "I learned to choose the leash every day. I refused 3 alliance claims because each smelled like a cage dressed as duty." He met her gaze, unguarded for once. "Then you walked through my gate smelling like moonflower and blood and rain, and every scar I carry lit like prophecy laughing in my face." The admission hit her harder than any court accusation. "Are you afraid of me?" she asked. "Yes," he said at once. She blinked. "Not of what you would do," he corrected, voice rough. "Of what I would do if I failed to keep you safe." Something in her chest, armored for years, cracked quietly down the center. Without thinking too hard, she took his hand. He froze, as if afraid to close fingers too fast and spook her. When she didn't pull away, He turned his palm up and linked them. Warmth moved through the bond, not the violent snap from the yard this time, but a steady tide. In it, she felt his restraint, his exhaustion, and beneath both a devotion so new it had no words yet. Aurora leaned her head briefly against his shoulder. Just once. Just enough to remember what unarmed felt like. Night Court reopened at Isolde's request. She came armed this time with witnesses. 2 nobles from minor houses testified they had heard Aurora was a purchased servant from Redfen. A Windrider scribe produced a copied inventory listing Oro, female, labor class. Isolde requested immediate confinement of Aurora for kingdom safety and repeated her mating claim like prayer. Drake denied her each time, voice colder with every petition. Then Isolde played her last polite card. She summoned the physicians to speak on record. One by one, in front of the full hall, each healer bowed and recited the same rehearsed line. Until lineage verification is complete, I cannot, by royal advisement, provide intervention. Cannot. 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 Not will not. Cannot. Coward's grammar. Aurora stood through all of it with her hand locked around the wolf-bone charm in her sleeve and her other hand hidden in her skirts where intermittent pain had sharpened into hard bands that wrapped her spine and belly and squeezed until she saw sparks. No one noticed at first. Or if they noticed, they called it nerves. Isolde noticed. Of course she did. She smiled. By the time court adjourned near midnight, rain had turned to sleet against the storm glass windows. Aurora made it halfway down the central corridor before a contraction dropped her to one knee. Stone slammed into her bandaged palms. Drake was beside her before anyone else moved. Aurora? She couldn't answer until the pain eased enough to breathe. I'm fine. He stared at her, then at the wet line suddenly darkening her skirts. Not water. Blood. His face changed. Rourke! He roared. Get the infirmary, now! Guard sprinted. Another contraction hit, longer, brutal, dragging a raw cry from her throat she could not bite back. The corridor filled with running feet, torchlight, confused voices. Mistress Vera arrived at a run with 2 apprentices, took one look at the blood, and went white. Please, Drake said, and there was nothing kingly in it, only command cracking into fear. Help her. Vera's hands shook. So did the apprentices. One by one, every 1,000. Ukhoso, ke, kosalasai shaseso, kowu, gulka, yeshistu so frel so dako. Chifi kisha se niniu, nieno kefi fasortiu, baino nakao, ke kisleu. Kake cho show, artio style no. Kekfi huar su. So did the apprentices. One by one, every healer in the corridor lowered their eyes and retreated behind policy, behind seals, behind fear. Aurora's vision narrowed to torch halos and Drake's face above hers, wild with helpless fury. A third contraction tore through her, and this time she felt a hot rush between her legs, unmistakable. Too soon, too fast, no healer. Drake scooped her into his arms. Prepare the birthing chamber, someone shouted. No, another voice whispered, horrified. No one will go in. Aurora grabbed Drake's collar with both fists, pain burning through her bones, and forced the words out between clenched teeth. Then they can all watch me die, or you can help me live. The wind hammered the keep. Die, or you can help me live. Drake's eyes die, or you can help me live. Drake's eyes burned gold. Tell me how. Another contraction ripped through her before she could answer. He carried her anyway. Fast, sure, boots hammering stone, past the birthing chamber doors where no one waited, no warm water, no midwife, no courage. Inside, the room was empty except for a made bed and untouched linens. "Get out," Drake snarled at the cluster of healers frozen in the doorway. "Either come in and do your duty or get out of my sight." No one crossed the threshold. Mistress Vera stood trembling with tears she would not let fall. "My king, if I break decree, my apprentices are exiled, my sons are ruined." Drake took one step toward her, rage shaking his shoulders. "And if she dies?" Vera looked at Aurora, then down. "I am sorry." She backed away. The others followed. Drake slammed the door so hard the latch splintered. Aurora rode the tail end of pain, breath scraping, sweat cold under her borrowed dress. "Don't waste time on them." "Time?" He wheeled on her, voice cracking with a terror he didn't bother to hide. "You're bleeding, and they abandoned you on paper, and I—" Another pain seized her, folding her nearly double. She gripped the bed frame and hissed through her teeth until it passed enough to speak. "Listen to me." She forced each word like a command on a battlefield. "My mother's lullaby wasn't just a lullaby. It was instruction." Drake dropped to his knees in front of her, hands hovering at her hips without touching. "Tell me." "Not here." She swallowed against nausea. "Moonstone Dais. Great Hall." His face went blank with disbelief. "You can't be serious." She hid it in the song. Old sovereign right, blood claim, emergency birth if line is hunted. Aurora grabbed his shirt and pulled him close, forehead to forehead. "If I die in this room, Isolde controls the story. If I bleed on the dais, truth has witnesses." He held still 1 beat, 2, war in his eyes. Then he nodded once. "Done." He surged up and kicked the broken door fully open. "Rourke!" The captain appeared at once, sword drawn. "Sire?" "Clear the great hall, wake the council. Bring iron pot, clean cloth, boiled water, and a brazier to the Moonstone Dais." Rourke stared. "The dais?" "Now." As guards ran, a cool voice drifted from the corridor shadows. "How dramatic," Isolde said, stepping into torchlight with her silver skirts untouched by the chaos. "You'd move a contaminated labor into the heart of your court?" Drake's growl rolled like thunder. "Leave." Isolde smiled at Aurora, pity sharpened to delight. "You poor thing. If you stop fighting, I can promise a painless end." Aurora tasted blood where she had bitten her lip. "You forged decrees to kill me by etiquette." "I protected a kingdom from scandal," Isolde corrected. "History won't care which woman screamed." Drake moved as if to lunge. Aurora caught his wrist. "Not now." Isolde tipped her head. "When she dies, Drake, I'll still accept your mating claim. Mercy is one of my finer qualities." Rourke and 2 guards physically barred her path as Drake lifted Aurora again. "Touch the dais and you'll regret being born," Drake told Isolde without looking back. He carried Aurora into the storm-lit corridor while thunder shook the keep. The great hall filled before dawn with the speed of disaster. Nobles stumbled in half-dressed under fur cloaks, warriors in partial armor, servants with armfuls of wood and kettles. The Moonstone Dais sat in the center of the hall, a raised disk of ancient silver-veined rock, carved runes circling its edge, old as the first pact treaties. Aurora had seen it from doorways and shadows. She had never stood on it. Now Drake set her down at its base as another contraction slammed through her so hard her vision blurred white. She cried out, not delicate, not quiet, a raw sound that bounced off rafters and made courtiers flinch. "Breathe with me," Drake said, already at her side, one hand bracing her lower back exactly where the pain knifed. "In 4, hold, out 4. She matched him because she had to. Rourke skidded in with a steaming iron pot, a short blade, cords, blankets, and clean rags. Drake took the blade, shoved it into boiling water, and looked back to Aurora. "Next. Red cloth, Tear strips. She clenched her jaw as pain rose again. If baby crowns and cord is wrong, loop twice, cut between. You remember all this from a song? I remember because my mother sang like someone being hunted. He tore cloth with his teeth and hands, efficient as war prep. At the edge of the circle, Isolde appeared with her clerks and the 3 white-cloaked physicians, who hung back like ghosts. "This is unlawful," she called. "Stop this now. She is unfit for intervention." Aurora laughed breathlessly through pain. "Then don't intervene." She pushed herself up to her knees. Blood ran down her thighs, warm and relentless. Gasps rippled through the hall. Drake reached to steady her. She caught his wrist. "Help me stand." He did. Every muscle in her body shook as she climbed one step, then another, onto the moonstone dais. Between contractions, she crawled to the center where the runes were deepest carved, old language spiraling like moons around a den. "Get down," Isolde snapped, suddenly less smooth. "You have no right." Aurora pressed her bleeding palm to the rune at the heart of the stone. It drank her blood. Cold shot up her arm to the shoulder, then turned to searing silver heat. The runes flared one by one, igniting around the dais in a ring of moonlight so bright the hall recoiled. Wind screamed down the chimneys. Torches bent inward toward the stone. Aurora heard her mother's voice in memory and in marrow. "Moon in the marrow, blood in the bone. Name yourself, child. Claim what is your own." She lifted her chin and spoke in the old tongue first, words rusted but intact. "By blood remembered and blood surviving, I invoke sovereign right. I am Aurora Bloodmoon, issue of Ilara's line. Let false seal burn. Let true witness stand." Silver fire leapt from rune to rune. One of Isolde's clerks shrieked as scroll tubes at his belt split open. Parchments burst into pale flame that did not consume the paper so much as strip it bare. Seals ran like wax in summer. Signatures unraveled into blank ink. Registry marks crawled off the page and blackened. Forgery revealed, in front of everyone. The hall erupted. Shouts, curses, someone sobbing, benches scraping. Drake did not look at the papers. He looked only at Aurora, awe and fear warring in his face. Another contraction hit like an axe. Aurora folded over, fingers clawing the runes. "Drake," she gasped. "Behind me, brace." He moved at once, kneeling behind her on the dais, one arm around her ribs, the other gripping her hand. "What do you need?" "Don't let me close my legs," she panted. "When I say push, count." He nodded, cheek against her temple, rain and storm scent wrapping around her as the hall spun. Isolde's composure shattered. "This proves nothing. Tricks of old stone." Moonlight snapped toward her like a whip. The last sealed decree in her hand ignited silver and exposed beneath its copied script a Windrider ledger. Bribe amounts, healer names, threat notes. Rourke snatched it up and read, voice ringing. Payment schedule to registry clerks. Exile threats to infirmaries. Ordered denial of care to subject Aurora. He looked up, murderous. Signed by Isolde Windrider. The physicians dropped to their knees, white-faced. Aurora bore down with a scream as Drake counted, voice rough but steady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pain tore her open. She tasted iron. "Again," she rasped. Around them, nobles watched an escaped servant claim blood right in silver fire while giving orders through labor. None of them would ever call her voiceless again. It took less than an hour and a lifetime. By the time first light stained the high storm glass, Aurora was half reclined against Drake's chest on the dais, hair plastered to her face, body shaking with exhaustion. Blood and sweat and moonlight slicked her skin. "I can see the head," Drake said, hands blood-wet, expression carved from concentration and terror. "Aurora, look at me. One more. Hard." She met his eyes and pushed with everything she had left. The world narrowed to pressure, burning, his voice, her own hoarse cry. Then sudden relief, weight leaving her body, and a wet, furious sound split the hall. A newborn's cry. Drake made a broken noise that might have been laughter or prayer. He lifted the tiny, slick body carefully, clearing nose and mouth exactly as Aurora had told him, rubbing hard until the cry strengthened. "She's breathing," he said, voice shaking. "She's here." He placed their daughter on Aurora's chest, warm, slippery, real. A shock of dark hair plastered to a wrinkled skull, fists already angry at the world. Aurora wept without restraint. "Mate," Drake whispered against her hair, and in the bond she felt him crack open with relief so vast it hurt. The hall seemed to exhale with them. Then Steele whispered. Isolde, cornered by truthlight and panic, moved faster than anyone expected. Skirts hitched, jeweled dagger flashing as she lunged up the dais steps straight for the infant. "A dead heir cannot rule," she hissed. Time fractured. Aurora twisted, dragging the baby tight against her chest with one arm. With the other, she grabbed the nearest fallen weapon, a ceremonial spear dropped by a stunned guard at the dais edge. She swung. The spear shaft slammed Isolde's dagger arm wide, then drove down with all Aurora's remaining strength and pinned Isolde's wrist to the soft seam between dais stones. Isolde screamed. The dagger clattered. Drake was on her in the same breath, wolf growl shaking the rafters. He kicked the dagger away, seized Isolde by the throat of her silk gown, and hauled her upright against the embedded spear. "Binding circle, now!" he roared. Rourke and two elders rushed forward, chalking oath runes around Isolde's feet while she spat and thrashed. Blood dripped from her wrist where the spear held her fast. "Release me!" she shrieked. "I am Windrider blood." "Your attempted regicide and infanticide," Rourke snapped. Drake pressed his thumb to the oath rune and bared his teeth. "By Alpha Law, compelled truth under moon witness, speak your crimes." The runes flashed. Isolde's body jerked as compulsion took hold. Her voice came out strangled, unwilling. "I bribed registry clerks. I drafted false medical decrees. I threatened healers with exile. I meant her to die in childbirth. I meant to present the Blood Moon signet as recovered relic and secure claim beside the Alpha throne." A roar of outrage tore through the court. "Say the last," Drake growled. Isolde sobbed in fury. "I ordered no aid. I left her to bleed." Silence dropped heavy as stone. Drake looked to Aurora. She cradled her daughter with trembling arms and slowly rose, blood still running down her legs, body wrecked and unbowed. She stepped to Isolde until they were nose to nose. "You wanted me voiceless? Hear me now. I sentence you to exile beyond pack borders, nameless and unmated." Isolde bared blood-stained teeth. "You were born to serve." Aurora held her gaze. "No, I was born to reign." She turned to the hall. "Record judgment. Strip her titles. Strike her seal from treaty stone. Escort her beyond the northern markers before sunset. If she crosses back, she stands trial for treason and attempted murder." Rourke struck fist to chest. "By your word!" Guards ripped the spear free, bound Isolde's bleeding wrist in iron, and dragged her down the dais steps while she screamed curses that no one answered. At the bottom of the hall, she twisted once, wild-eyed, and shrieked at Drake, "You doom us all with this." Drake's gaze never left Aurora and their child. "No," he said. "I chose." Hours later, Storm had burned off into a hard, clear morning. Aurora lay in Drake's private chamber, propped against pillows, wrapped in clean linen that smelled like cedar and smoke. Their daughter slept against her chest, tiny mouth open, one fist tucked under her own cheek. Every few breaths she made soft, snuffling noises like a wolf pup dreaming. Drake sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, freshly scrubbed, a new bandage across one forearm where Isolde's dagger had nicked him in the struggle. He had not gone farther than arm's reach since dawn. Outside the door, guards stood watch. Inside, quiet finally settled. Aurora traced one finger down the baby's back. Did the court accept it? Moonstone accepted it, Drake said. Court followed. And the healers? His mouth tightened. Vera came to confess under oath before I summoned her. She named every threat letter. I've put her and her apprentices under protection pending tribunal. They failed you. They were also coerced. Aurora nodded, exhausted enough to feel mercy and fury at once. Drake watched her for a long moment, then drew a slow breath. There's one thing left. Only if you want it. Only now or later or never. She looked up. He reached to his throat, fingers steady despite the pulse jumping there, and unfastened the leather tie that held his collar closed. I offer my mark, he said quietly. I offer my mark, he said quietly. To you first, not as owner, as mate. Will you take it? Aurora's chest tightened around sudden tears. You're asking me to bite the Alpha King. I'm asking Aurora Bloodmoon to claim what's already hers if she chooses. His voice roughened. If you say no, I will still stand at your side until my last breath. She shifted carefully, wincing, and handed him their sleeping daughter. He took the baby with reverent gentleness and laid her in the padded cradle beside the bed, then returned and knelt so his throat was level with her mouth. Tell me what you want, he whispered. You, she said. Chosen, not prophesied. A shudder ran through him. Aurora cupped his jaw with both hands. Mine? His eyes went molten gold and soft all at once. Yours. She bared her teeth and bit. His skin gave under her canines with a hot, metallic burst. Drake's breath punched out in a groan that sounded half pain, half relief so profound it made her own body answer. Warmth flooded her tongue, then surged down her spine like liquid fire turning to light. The room brightened at the edges. The bond, once a rope of tension, snapped into a living current. Drake clutched her waist, shaking. Mate. He breathed against her mouth when she released him, blood beading at the crescent wound. Aurora licked the mark once, instinctive, sealing. Mine. He laughed softly, wrecked and adoring. Always. Then he went still and searched her face. May I? She turned, baring the junction of neck and shoulder where pulse fluttered wild. Yes. His palm spanned her upper back, grounding and careful. When his teeth found her skin, the first puncture burned, sharp, bright, claiming. Aurora cried out and arched into him. He held steady, pressured deep enough to mark, controlled enough not to tear, until pain transformed under her skin into a molten throb that spread through chest and belly, and the empty ache where labor had left her raw. Pleasure followed on its heels, fierce and startling. Not softness, power, recognition, home. Images flashed through the bond in rapid silver pulses. Drake and Rain at 16 refusing a political bride. Aurora under cellar smoke clutching a hidden ring. Both of them tonight on the dais. Blood and moonfire and a child's first cry. Fear burned off like fog. He released her with a rough sound and pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard. Yours, he whispered. Mine, she answered, then touched the fresh mark at his throat. Mate. The bond locked. It felt like a door opening inward after years barricaded shut. Warmth pooled in her sternum and spread to every bruised edge of her, knitting fractures she hadn't known how to name. She could feel him distinctly now. His pulse, his grounding calm threaded with joy, his absolute refusal to let go. Drake smiled, small and disbelieving. No prophecy owns me now. Aurora laid her hand over his heart. Then choose me anyway. He kissed her brow, her marked shoulder, her mouth. Always. Their daughter made a sleepy squeak in the cradle. Both of them turned at once and laughed quietly, forehead to forehead, still holding each other while the settled bond hummed like shared breath. By evening, the great hall was full again, but this time for law, not blood. Aurora stood on the moonstone dais in a deep blue gown cut to leave her new mark visible at her shoulder. The blood moon signet sat on her finger, resized and gleaming despite its old crack. Drake stood at her right, scarred throat banded with her bite, no crown on his head and no shame in his posture. In her arms, their daughter slept through politics as if born to it. Captain Rourke called the hall to order. Witness decree of Aurora Blood Moon, restored heir and Luna Queen of United Moon and Storm Court. Some nobles still looked stunned saying the title. None challenged it. Aurora's voice carried clear to the rafters. First decree. Healer neutrality is sacred law in all allied territories. No healer, midwife, or apprentice may deny urgent treatment due to politics, bloodline dispute, debt status, pack rank, or mating claim. Any who coerce refusal by threat, bribe, or decree commit high crime. She looked toward Mistress Vera, who stood pale but upright in the witness line. Second, Aurora continued, those forced under coercion who testify truth receive protection. Fear will not be a weapon again. Vera bowed, tears finally falling. Rourke read the enforcement clauses: tribunal authority, supply protections, border asylum for medical staff, penalties for interference, quills scratched, seals pressed hot wax. Drake stepped forward when called. I, Drake Stormborn, accept title of Alpha Consort under joint rule and swear pack enforcement of the healer law. He knelt, not to submit to rumor but to choose, and kissed Aurora's ring hand before the court. Gasps softened into a wave of chest-struck salutes from Stormborn warriors. In the second row, Lord Halric stood in chains between guards, hauled from Windrider at dawn by treaty writ once Isolde's confession became public record. He tried to sneer and managed only fear. Aurora met his eyes. For trafficking bonded servants under falsified contracts and attempted unlawful reclamation, you are stripped of holdings and remanded to labor restitution under Crown oversight. Every servant taken through your house will be named, freed, and compensated from your estate. Halric lunged, chains snapped him back. Brigg, dragged in behind him with a bruised face and no swagger, wouldn't look up. Aurora didn't spare him. For torture and coercion of bonded laborers, 10 years penal service at border works under supervision. Any strike against a worker adds a year. Rourke grinned without humor. He'll be busy. By custom, one council seat remained empty during final sealing. Tonight it was Isolde's, silver-backed, untouched, set in plain sight. Aurora rested her palm on the moonstone and spoke final judgment for the record. Let that empty chair stand, not hidden, a reminder that jealousy dressed as duty still rots kingdoms. The hall answered as one, fist to chest, witnessed. When ceremony ended, protocol finally loosened. Warriors crowded in to glimpse the pup. Kitchen maids brought broth thick with herbs. One of Vera's apprentices, hands still shaking, asked permission to examine the baby, and did so with reverence while Aurora watched, this time by choice. On the western terrace at dusk, Aurora and Drake stood wrapped in one cloak, daughter between them, and watched storm clouds break over pine-dark ridges. Below, the exile caravan rolled out the north gate, Isolde in an unmarked wagon, wrists bound, no crest flying. She did not look back. Drake touched the mark on Aurora's shoulder with 2 fingers, then the one at his throat. You all right? Aurora leaned into him, listening to the steady double beat now synchronized into one living rhythm. I am now. Their pup yawned, tiny teeth budding like milk-white secrets. Drake smiled down at her. She has your bite. Good, Aurora said. Wind lifted the banners overhead, storm black and moon silver side by side, and for once, The sound in the keep was not fear, not plotting, but the ordinary noise of a court learning peace. Hammers in the yard, laughter from the kitchens, a healer calling for more clean bandages without asking anyone's permission first. Aurora looked at the kingdom that had nearly buried her and said softly but certain, "We begin here." "Together," Drake said. "Together," she agreed, and kissed him while their daughter slept warm between their hearts.